Hey, good morning. Let's go over today's trade plan. So in the overnight session, we saw that ES sold off all the way down to 33.5, but then fully recovered the entire downside move, and at this point is simply balancing within a range. Heading into the open, we're going to be using the 2050 to 52 area as the initial support zone, and as long as the market is holding above initial support, the buy side can still step in, and we can still get some upside movement from here. But really, to establish our bias on the day time frame, we're going to have to see not only does initial support hold, but then can ES break above initial resistance at 58.75 to 60.75. That is really what's needed at this point to confirm buyers back in control. Until then, this is simply a balanced market, and it can really tip either way. It can either break below initial support, and that can lead to some liquidation, or it can break out above the initial resistance zone, and that can lead to some more aggressive buying up towards the 64.65 and 69 quarter to 71 quarter area. So how the market resolves this balance between initial support and initial resistance is really what's going to help us establish the bias on the day time frame, and I think that's really what's going to set the tone as far as direction goes on the day time frame. So if we do end up breaking and holding below 50 to 52, that would indicate sell side in control, and from there we can quite easily move down to 41 to 43 and potentially even down for a retest of 30.5 to 33.5, which is the bigger picture balance area low. And given that it is a bigger picture zone, buyers can technically still defend that 30.5 to 33.5 area. But in the event that we do end up going down there and we end up breaking 30.5, then that could end up in some continued liquidation. But given that we've already established a pretty wide overnight range, and 30.5 is still quite a ways away, ES will probably be pretty exhausted heading down into that zone. So it doesn't have to break it just on first test. It may end up going down there, balancing, and then eventually it could be setting up for a break. But it doesn't have to happen on the day time frame. And so far from what we've seen in the overnight session, even though we went all the way down to 33.5, at the same time buyers stepped right back in and reversed the entire move. So it's a very neutral bias at this point heading into the open. But if we're holding 50 to 52, then it's better to give edge to the buy side and look for a breakout of 58.75 to 60.75. But that's something that we will have to determine in real time, depending on the level of momentum we're seeing on the upside, whether the AD line overall is relatively stable. It doesn't mean that it has to be positive, but as long as it's not extremely negative and it's stabilizing and heading higher, that can still lead to an upside move beyond the initial resistance zone up towards 69 quarter to 71 quarter, and possibly even 75 to 77, depending on just the level of buying and the level of momentum we see in the market. One thing we know is that we are trading in a market that is higher in volatility. We're seeing expanded ranges. We're seeing higher relative volume, and that can mean either a wider range or just more volatility within that range, right? It typically leads to bigger rotations, bigger intraday swings. So usually that's better opportunities on the day time frame. But at the same time, because there's this added volatility, we just have to make sure that we're accounting for it in our stop sizes, and that we're still fairly selective in the trades that we take. And I think as long as that's happening, then you can easily spot one or two really good opportunities on the day time frame, which offer at least 2-to-1 reward to risk, good trade location, and because the rotations are larger, the swings are larger, even a reactionary trade can give you 5 or 6 points, and sometimes even more. So it is a good time to be active in the market. We just need to see which way the direction really resolves, because right now it's very two-sided, and for that we're going to keep an eye on initial support and initial resistance. That's what's going to help us establish the bias on the day. On the econ front, we have the ISM manufacturing index out at 9 a.m. Central Time. That's the primary catalyst on the day time frame. So in the first 30 minutes, we can get some continued balancing in a range, and then perhaps get some directional conviction after 9 a.m. Central Time. So those are the main thoughts and ideas heading into the open. Let's see if the buy side is able to hold it above initial support, and we'll take it from there.